Daniel smiled when he saw me still seated at the table. His smile was warm, a reminder that he was still my son, still the boy I had raised, even if tonight he seemed far from me. He bent down and whispered, "Mum, are you doing okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile, not wanting him to see the weight I carried in my chest. "I'm fine," I said softly. He squeezed my hand once before moving along with Layla to the next group of guests. I watched him as he made his way through the ballroom, shaking hands, laughing, posing for photos. He looked so proud, and I wanted so much to be proud too. This was his wedding, his chance at building a family of his own. No matter what I had already overheard, I told myself to hold on to the hope that maybe things would change once the vows were spoken. Maybe Layla's sharp tongue was only nerves. Maybe she would soften, and maybe her family would learn to see me as more than a guest on the edge of the room. The waiters continued to serve champagne, and the chatter around me grew louder. People from Layla's side dominated the room, speaking confidently, laughing easily. My side of the family was small, only a handful of cousins and old friends scattered across two tables. They looked uneasy, as if they too felt out of place in this sea of extravagance. I caught my cousin Margaret's eyes across the room. She gave me a small nod as if to say, "Stay strong." I held on to that. When the music slowed, Daniel took the microphone to thank everyone for coming. His words were full of gratitude, and he mentioned both families, how grateful he was to have everyone gathered. I clapped with the others, though my hands trembled slightly. I wanted to believe him when he said, "This is the happiest day of my life." I wanted to share in that happiness. After the speech, the first courses were served. Plates of salad with imported cheeses and delicate garnishes were placed before us. I picked at mine, my appetite gone, but I smiled politely at the waiter. Across the room, Layla laughed with her bridesmaids, tossing her hair back, her diamond earrings catching the light. She seemed to glow under the attention, her confidence filling the space. Daniel stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her back. The sight both comforted and unsettled me. As I chewed slowly, I told myself again that I needed to try. For Daniel's sake, I had to at least make the effort. He deserved a chance at love without his mother standing in the way. So when Layla eventually walked toward my table, her smile rehearsed and her posture perfect, I set down my fork and braced myself. She leaned down slightly and said, "I hope you are enjoying the evening." Her words were polite, but her eyes held a gleam of amusement. I met her gaze and answered, "It's a beautiful wedding. You look very happy." She tilted her head, thanked me, then walked back to her friends. To anyone watching, it looked like a pleasant exchange. Only I knew the sharpness beneath her tone. As the night moved forward, I clung to the hope that things would get better. The ceremony itself had not yet taken place, only the reception and celebration before the vows. There was still time for Layla to prove me wrong. There was still time for Daniel to show me that my fears were misplaced. I sat quietly, listening to conversations swirl around me, catching fragments of talk about business deals, vacations in Europe, expensive cars. Their world seemed so far removed from mine. Yet I reminded myself that I did not need to belong to their world. All I wanted was to keep my place in my son's. Daniel returned to my table between courses. He crouched beside me and asked, "Are you comfortable? Do you need anything?" I shook my head, touched by his concern. "I'm fine," I said again. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "I'm glad you're here." That small gesture warmed me more than the food or the music or the glittering lights. For a moment, hope flared brighter inside me. When the main course arrived, I tried again to eat, though the knot in my stomach remained. The chatter grew louder, laughter echoing through the hall. Every so often I caught Layla's eyes on me, her lips curved in a smirk I could not mistake. Still, I told myself to breathe, to endure. She was young, she was nervous, and maybe her sharpness was only temporary. The band played a soft melody as waiters cleared plates. The cake, taller than I was, stood near the dance floor, decorated with roses and gold details. Guests pointed at it with admiration, snapping photos. I looked at it too, thinking about the money it must have cost, and again reminded myself that I had paid for much of this evening. I had done it for Daniel, never expecting to be mocked for the sacrifice. When the time came for the first dance, Daniel and Layla stepped onto the floor. He looked at her as if she were the only person in the room. The love in his eyes was undeniable. My heart ached, torn between pride and pain. I wanted to stand, to clap, to cheer for them, and I did. But inside, I whispered a prayer that this love would be stronger than the arrogance that had already surfaced. As the dance ended and applause filled the hall, I sat back down, my thoughts heavy. The night was far from over. More speeches, more toasts, and eventually the vows awaited. I told myself to hold on, to let Daniel have his moment, to hope that things might shift. For his sake, I was willing to wait. I folded my hands in my lap and lifted my chin. The humiliation I had felt earlier still burned, but I pressed it down. For now, I clung to hope. I would give them the chance to show me something different. Because despite the sting of Layla's words, despite the smirks and whispers, I still wanted to believe in the promise of this night. The music swelled again after the first dance, and the lights dimmed just enough to make the room glow with a golden warmth. Guests filled the dance floor, laughing and twirling, glasses raised in celebration. I remained at my table, smiling when people passed, trying to hold on to the thread of hope I had been clutching all night. But that thread frayed quickly. Layla returned to her group of bridesmaids, her voice rising above the music. She leaned close to one of them and whispered in Arabic, her eyes cutting toward me. "Look at her sitting alone. She looks like a stray cat waiting for scraps." The women laughed, covering their mouths as though they were being discreet, but their giggles carried. My stomach tightened. The insult was sharper this time, meaner, deliberate. I reached for my water glass, willing my hand not to shake. The cold liquid steadied me, but my chest still burned. Around me, conversations continued as if nothing had happened. No one else seemed to notice, or perhaps they chose not to. That was the worst part, the way humiliation could feel invisible to everyone, but the one suffering through it. Daniel walked by again, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned now, his cheeks flushed from champagne and excitement. He gave me another smile, quick but warm, before being pulled toward another group of friends. He didn't hear the laughter, didn't see the way Layla's eyes flicked at me like knives, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him. Not yet. The next moment came faster than I expected. Layla approached my table with two of her bridesmaids trailing behind her. She rested her hand on the back of the empty chair beside me and said, "Are you enjoying yourself?" Her tone was sugary, her smile practiced. I answered calmly, "It's a beautiful evening." She tilted her head. "Good. I was worried you might not feel comfortable." The pause before her last word carried weight. The bridesmaids exchanged glances, then smirked. Layla leaned down slightly, lowering her voice just enough to make it clear she wanted me to hear. In Arabic, she said, "She really thinks she belongs here." Then she straightened up and laughed as though she had just told a charming joke. I kept my face neutral, but inside the fury boiled. I knew exactly what she had said. She had crossed a line, one she assumed I could never recognize. The arrogance in her voice left no room for doubt. This wasn't nervousness or immaturity. This was disdain. I placed my napkin neatly on the table and looked her in the eye. "I'm fine where I am," I said simply. She blinked, her smile faltering for a brief second. Then she recovered, offered another shallow compliment, and walked away with her friends. The band played louder, guests clapped to the beat, and waiters began setting up the dessert table. I sat still, every insult replaying in my mind. My fingers traced the edge of my clutch. I reminded myself again and again to breathe, to wait. But the weight of the evening pressed down harder. It wasn't just the words, it was the look in her eyes when she said them. The certainty that I was powerless, irrelevant, someone she could humiliate without consequence. She believed I didn't understand. She believed I had nothing. She believed the entire wedding belonged to her family, and that I was only a tolerated figure in the background. As I watched her glide across the room in her gown, basking in the admiration of her friends and relatives, something inside me shifted. Hope no longer sat gently in my chest. It was replaced by resolve. I knew I couldn't let this continue. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, but it had turned into a stage for her cruelty. And cruelty only grows when it isn't confronted. I thought about the years I had carried Daniel, the endless sacrifices, the quiet nights spent alone making sure he had what he needed. I thought about the long days at work, the bills paid, the house kept running. None of those people laughing across the room had walked in my shoes. None of them had earned the right to erase me from my son's life. The smirks, the whispers, the mocking words, in a language they thought I couldn't understand. They were no longer just small insults. They were warning of what life with Layla would look like for Daniel. If she could humiliate me this easily in front of hundreds of people, what would she do behind closed doors? I pushed my chair back slightly and stood, needing to stretch my legs, needing to put space between myself and the table where those whispers still echoed. I walked toward the far corner of the ballroom, near the tall windows that overlooked the city lights. From there, I could see everything. The dance floor alive with movement, the tables crowded with chatter, the bride and her friends basking in their own confidence. I felt invisible, but I also felt stronger. The distance gave me clarity. I would not leave this wedding crushed. I would not let their arrogance define my place here. Tonight, the balance would shift, whether they expected it or not. The waiter passed by with a tray of champagne flutes. I took one, held it steady, and let the bubbles rise to the surface. I stared into the golden fizz and thought, they believe I don't understand. They believe I'm nothing, but they're about to find out how wrong they are. The music swelled again, voices rising with it. Layla laughed across the room, unaware that every cruel word she had spoken was already working against her. The night was far from over, and so was I. The moment came when I realized I could not sit quietly any longer. Layla's laughter, her whispers in Arabic, the smirks passed between her friends, had piled up into something heavier than I could bear. My pride was not the only thing at stake anymore. My son's future was in her hands, and she was already showing everyone the contempt she carried for me. If she could insult me so freely, what else was she capable of once the vows were spoken and the doors were closed? I sat back at the table, my hands resting on the silver clutch in my lap. I breathed in slowly, steadying myself. The music swirled around the room, people danced and clapped, the band played with cheerful rhythm, but inside me something different was forming. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. Every cruel word Layla had spoken replayed in my mind. She looks like a stray cat. She doesn't belong here. She thought she had built a wall of language between us, a secret shield. She never imagined I could understand. The truth was, I understood every word. 15 years teaching Arabic at the university had left me fluent. I had not used the language much since retirement, but it lived in me still, sharp and precise. She thought she was clever, but she had made a mistake, and that mistake was mine to use. The thought gave me a strange calm. My humiliation began to shift into something stronger. For the first time that evening, I felt a sense of control. I did not need to scream across the ballroom. I did not need to demand respect with tears. I had something better. I had knowledge, and knowledge could be wielded like a blade if I chose the right moment. I glanced across the room where Layla stood with her bridesmaids. She had the confidence of someone who thought she had already won. She was radiant in her gown, but the beauty was laced with arrogance. I studied her carefully, thinking of Daniel. My son was blind to it all. He saw love where I saw calculation. He saw devotion where I saw contempt. The more I watched, the more I knew I had to act. I leaned back, lifting my glass of water. In that quiet moment, I thought of my late husband. He had always told me, "Evelyn, never let anyone silence you. Dignity is worth fighting for." His voice seemed to echo in the hall, steadying me. I would not be silenced tonight. I reached into my clutch and touched the folded document inside. It was not an accident that I had brought it. Weeks before the wedding, when Daniel had announced the expensive venue and extravagant plans, I had worried about where the money would come from. He had assured me Layla's family would contribute, but I knew the truth. My savings had covered most of it. The gown, the band, the food, even the towering cake. I had signed the checks quietly, telling myself it was for his happiness. But I had also prepared. In the clutch was a copy of my will, a document that held the weight of my estate, the land, the house, the millions I had guarded carefully, and it carried conditions. I pressed the paper flat beneath my fingers, hidden from view. If Layla wanted to treat me like a fool, she would learn tonight that I was far from powerless. She would learn that her laughter came at a price she could not afford. The waiters dimmed the lights for the next round of speeches. Guests quieted, the chatter softening into a low hum. The microphone was passed to one of Layla's uncles, who spoke warmly about love and loyalty. I listened, though my attention was elsewhere. My decision was made. I would wait for my moment, the right break in the evening, and then I would show her exactly who I was. Layla caught my eye as her uncle spoke. Her lips curved in a smirk, quick and smug. She thought she had silenced me with her secret jokes, that I was too simple to catch her meaning. I returned her look with steady calm. Inside, though, I was already planning every step of what would come next. When the applause ended and the music swelled again, I rose from my chair. I walked toward the hallway outside the ballroom, each step purposeful. From my phone, I dialed the number saved under attorney. The line clicked, and I spoke quietly. "It's Evelyn. Yes, tonight. Bring the documents. Bring the notary. I want it official. Meet me outside the ballroom doors in 20 minutes." Hanging up, I stood for a moment in the quiet corridor. My reflection in the gilded mirror showed a woman who was no longer fragile. The lines on my face were still there, the years of sacrifice still visible. But there was something else, too. Determination, resolve, a sharpness that no insult could dull. I re-entered the ballroom, my head high. No one noticed me slip back to my table. The band played, guests laughed, and Layla shined under the lights, unaware of the shift that had already begun. She thought this night belonged to her. She thought she had broken me. She had no idea that she had just awakened the part of me that refused to bow. The night would continue, the cake would be cut, the vows would be spoken, but my course was set. I would not allow Daniel to tie his life to someone who mocked his mother so openly. The opportunity was coming, and when it did, I would not hesitate. I rested my hand on the clutch again, feeling the weight of the paper inside. It was more than ink and signatures. It was power. It was protection. And tonight it would be the key to exposing the truth. Layla had made me out to be weak. Soon she would see how wrong she was. I returned to my seat as if nothing had happened, my hands folded neatly in my lap. The ballroom swirled around me with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. No one knew that outside, down the corridor, my attorney and the notary were already on their way. I kept my face calm, my posture straight, but inside my thoughts moved quickly, sharper than the knives cutting into the wedding feast. The waiters cleared the last plates of the main course. The air was filled with the rich scent of roasted meat and butter, but I could barely taste the food. My appetite had vanished hours ago. Across the room, Layla laughed with her bridesmaids, her confidence growing with every cruel joke. Her arrogance was a curtain she thought no one could lift. She did not notice the way I watched her, did not suspect that each insult had become another stone in the wall I was building against her. I adjusted the clutch on my lap, the paper inside pressing lightly against my palm. The will was ready. My savings, my land, the $4.5 million worth of soil and sweat that represented my life's work. It was all there, and it would not go to anyone who disrespected me. That condition had been written clearly, signed, and sealed. Tonight, if Layla wanted to treat me as nothing, she would learn how costly that mistake could be. A soft voice pulled me from my thoughts. Margaret, my cousin, leaned over from the next table. "Are you all right?" she whispered. I gave her a small nod. "I'm fine," I answered. She studied my face, then gave me a firm look. "Don't let them walk over you, Evelyn." I pressed her hand lightly and smiled. "I won't." The band shifted to a slower tune. Couples filled the dance floor, spinning under the chandeliers. Daniel led Layla out, their movements graceful, his eyes locked on hers. He looked so happy, so blind. My chest ached. I wanted to protect him, but I also knew I could not tear his world apart with raw anger. If I acted, it had to be with precision. Layla leaned her head on his shoulder, her smile soft and perfect for the cameras. Yet when she glanced up and caught me watching, her eyes hardened. The sweetness faded, replaced with that familiar smirk. She leaned close to Daniel, whispering in his ear, and then she laughed, her gaze never leaving me. He laughed too, clueless, caught in the glow of her charm. The song ended, guests clapped, cheering as the couple bowed. Layla took the microphone from the DJ, her voice bright. "Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. My family and I are so honored to celebrate with you all." She paused, her eyes flicking briefly to me before she continued. "We are especially grateful to those who have supported us on this journey." Her words sounded kind, but the glance told me what she really meant. It was another reminder that she believed I was out of place. I sat quietly, letting her speech wash over the crowd. Then I reached for my phone under the table and typed a short message. "At the doors. Be ready." My thumb hovered for a moment. Then I pressed send. The minutes stretched. Waiters began to bring out trays of dessert. The towering cake stood at the edge of the dance floor, glittering with gold decorations, waiting for the knife. Guests pulled out their phones, ready to capture the moment. Layla floated across the room like a queen, greeting people, accepting compliments, pretending sweetness. Daniel followed, glowing in her shadow. I remained silent, biding my time. My heart beat steady now, not with fear, but with certainty. I had chosen my path. Every humiliation had led me here. I would not leave this night bowed and broken. Finally, I rose from my chair. The clutch was firm in my hand, the weight of the paper inside grounding me. I walked slowly toward the back of the hall, slipping through the crowd as though heading for the restroom. No one stopped me. At the door, I saw them, my attorney in his dark suit, the notary beside him with a leather folder in hand. They looked professional, steady, ready. I nodded once. 10 minutes, I said quietly. When I signal, you walk straight to me. The attorney gave a short nod. The notary adjusted her glasses and clutched the folder. I turned back toward the hall, my pulse quickening. Returning to my seat, I scanned the room. Layla was near the cake now, Daniel's arm around her waist. She basked in the applause as if she had orchestrated the entire evening herself. She had no idea her moment of glory was about to shatter. I took a sip of water, my eyes never leaving her. She thought she owned this night. She thought the ballroom, the guests, even my son belonged to her. But soon, in front of every single person, she would learn otherwise. The band ended another song. The DJ announced that it was time for toasts from the families. My moment was coming closer. I gripped the clutch tighter, the paper pressing against my fingers like a promise. I leaned back, breathing evenly. The chaos of the evening faded into a sharp line of focus. No one saw the storm forming inside me. They only saw a quiet woman sitting at a table, sipping water, waiting politely. But beneath that calm, I was ready. The stage was set. The players were in place. And soon, the truth would walk through those doors with me. The hall quieted as the DJ announced that it was time for a special toast from the groom's family. Glasses clinked, chairs scraped, and hundreds of eyes turned in my direction. For a heartbeat, I considered staying seated, letting the moment pass. But then I rose. My clutch was in my hand, steady, and the words I had held back all night pressed against my lips like fire waiting to be released. I walked toward the center of the room, the heels of my shoes clicking against the marble floor. The lights shimmered off the chandeliers, the music faded, and for the first time that evening, every head turned to me. Daniel looked surprised, but proud. He gave me an encouraging nod. Layla's smile froze, her fingers tightening around her champagne flute. She did not expect me to take the stage. I accepted the microphone from the DJ and held it firmly. My voice carried clear and strong. Tonight is a celebration of love and of family. I have listened to many words spoken with joy and kindness. Now it is my turn. A ripple moved through the room. I took a slow breath, and then I switched to Arabic. The room stilled. I spoke fluently, every word crisp. I wish the bride and groom a long life together. May they know respect, because without it, love will not survive. Gasps spread across the hall. Some of Layla's relatives leaned forward, eyes wide. The bridesmaids exchanged nervous glances. Daniel's brow furrowed, confused. Layla's face drained of color. She tried to recover, forcing a laugh. You speak Arabic? She asked, her voice thin. I looked straight at her. I understand everything you have said tonight. The silence broke into murmurs. Guests whispered, some shocked, some amused. Layla's hands shook, her mask slipping for the first time. She tried to sneer, but it came out brittle. You must have misunderstood. I did not flinch. No, I heard you call me a stray cat. I heard you say I do not belong here. And I heard the laughter you shared with your friends. My words landed like stones in the middle of the floor. The room shifted uneasily, people glancing at one another. Layla's smile vanished. Her voice sharpened. This is ridiculous. You're making a scene. I lifted my chin. No, Layla. You made a scene when you mocked me at my son's wedding. You thought your words were secret, but they were not. Daniel stepped forward, his face pale. Layla, what is she talking about? His voice carried a crack of disbelief. Layla reached for him, her nails digging into his sleeve. She's twisting things. She's jealous, can't you see? The tension thickened. Guests leaned closer, whispering louder. My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady. I came here tonight with the hope of being welcomed. Instead, I was ridiculed, and I stayed quiet, until now. Because respect is not a gift. It is earned, and it is required. The DJ shifted awkwardly near his booth. Waiters paused with trays in hand. The entire celebration hung in suspension. I handed the microphone back, but I was not finished. Not yet. I raised my glass high. To my son and his bride, may they remember that love cannot grow where contempt is planted. The words were polite enough for a toast, but sharp enough to cut through every lie. I drank, placed the glass back on the table, and sat. The silence stretched. Then applause broke out from my side of the family, cautious but firm. Others joined, clapping uncertainly. The tension cracked open, and the room was alive again, though not in the same way. Layla's poise was broken. She whispered furiously to her mother, her cheeks flushed red, her eyes darting toward me like daggers. Daniel stood between us, his confusion plain. Layla, is this true? Did you say those things? She snapped, her voice low but harsh. It doesn't matter. She's just trying to embarrass me. I sat calmly, my hands folded, but my resolve was hard as steel. This was only the beginning. The attorney and the notary were waiting by the doors. Soon, the truth about everything else would be revealed. But for now, my first move was made. The band struck up another tune, but the notes felt off, forced. The guests returned to their seats, but their eyes lingered on me, then on Layla, then on Daniel. Whispers filled the air like smoke. Layla tried to laugh, tried to reclaim her charm, but the mask had slipped. She would not recover it so easily. I sipped my water, calm again. The humiliation that had weighed me down hours earlier was gone. In its place was power. For the first time that night, I felt the balance tilt, and I knew Layla felt it too. The ballroom felt heavier after my toast, as if every crystal on the chandeliers had absorbed the tension in the air. Layla forced a smile as she clutched Daniel's arm, whispering furiously into his ear. Guests shifted in their chairs, unsure whether to continue celebrating or to wait for whatever was coming next. I knew my moment had arrived. I stood again, my clutch tight in my hand. The attorney and notary were just outside, waiting for my signal. The DJ hesitated with the microphone, uncertain whether to hand it back, but I took it calmly. My voice rang clear. Before we cut the cake, I have something important to share. Layla hissed, "This is my wedding, sit down." Her words were sharp, but I didn't flinch. I met her eyes and spoke evenly. This is Daniel's wedding, and as his mother, I will be heard. Gasps rippled across the tables. Daniel looked at me with confusion, torn between loyalty and disbelief. Layla tried to pull him away, but I lifted my hand toward the doors. Right on cue, the attorney and notary walked in, dressed in dark suits, their folders in hand. The room stilled, the music cutting off as the band set down their instruments. Layla's voice rose, panicked. What is this? Why are they here? I answered plainly. They are here because tonight is not only a wedding, it is also the reading of a document that concerns my son's future. The attorney opened his folder, pulling out the thick, signed copy of my will. He spoke with authority. By request of Mrs. Evelyn Carter, this document will be read publicly. Layla stepped forward, her face red. This is insane. You can't do this. Not here. I turned to her, my voice calm but cutting. You thought tonight was your stage. You thought your laughter would go unnoticed. But if you want to treat me as nothing, then let everyone see what nothing really means. The notary adjusted her glasses and nodded, confirming the legality. Guests leaned in, murmuring, their curiosity rising. Daniel froze, his eyes locked on me. "Mum, what is going on?" he asked. I looked at him gently. "You'll understand in a moment." The attorney began to read. His voice carried through the speakers. This document declares that the estate of Mrs. Evelyn Carter, including her land holdings in Texas, valued at $4.5 million, is to be inherited by her son, Daniel Carter, with the condition that his spouse treats her with respect and dignity. The hall erupted. Gasps, whispers, and even a few sharp cries filled the space. Layla's face drained of colour, her hand trembling around her champagne glass. She turned on Daniel, hissing, "She's lying. She's trying to ruin us." Daniel's voice cracked. $4.5 million? The attorney held the document high. "Signed and sealed. This is binding." Layla's panic turned into rage. She stormed toward me, her words venomous. "You planned this. You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. You bitter old woman." I rose from my chair, meeting her fury with calm steel. "No, Layla. You humiliated yourself. I only made sure everyone saw the truth." Her voice broke into a scream. "Daniel, tell her to stop." Daniel looked between us, his face pale, his hands shaking. For the first time, doubt shadowed his eyes when he looked at his bride. "Is it true? Did you say those things to her?" Layla faltered, stammering. "It doesn't matter. She's just trying to control you." I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. "It matters, because respect is the foundation of family, and you showed tonight you have none." The attorney placed the document on the table for all to see. The notary confirmed its validity with a stamp. The sound of it echoed like a gavel striking down judgment. Guests began whispering louder, some shaking their heads, others glaring at Layla. The energy of the celebration had shifted into something raw and electric. The bride, once so untouchable, now stood exposed before hundreds. Layla lunged for the microphone, desperate to take control. "This woman is crazy. She's ruining everything. You all came here to celebrate us, not to listen to her lies." Her voice cracked, and the desperation in her tone only fueled the whispers around her. Daniel pulled her back, gently but firmly. "Enough," he said, his voice low but steady. She turned on him, eyes wild. "Are you going to choose her over me?" He didn't answer, but his silence spoke louder than any words. I stood tall, my voice steady, carrying through the hall one last time. This wedding was built on my sacrifice, on my money, on my love for my son. If you think you can mock me, if you think you can erase me, remember this night, because without respect, there is no inheritance, no foundation, and no future. The ballroom hung in silence, broken only by the faint hum of the lights overhead. The celebration had turned into confrontation, the kind that left no room for pretense. The bride was stripped of her mask, and the truth had been laid bare. The room trembled with whispers, the weight of the attorney's words hanging like smoke that refused to clear. Layla's face was twisted with rage, her polished mask shattered in front of everyone. Guests leaned in closer to each other, muttering, some hiding their smiles, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The grandeur of the ballroom, the glittering lights, the towering cake, all seemed smaller now, swallowed by the humiliation that had taken center stage. Daniel stood frozen, his gaze flicking between me and his bride. His confusion was plain, but the silence he gave her was more painful than any accusation. Layla grabbed his arm tightly, her nails biting into his sleeve. "Daniel, say something. Don't just stand there." He shook his head slightly. "What do you want me to say? Did you say those things or not?" Her eyes darted around, desperate for support, but all she found were the stares of guests who had heard enough. A few of her bridesmaids lowered their eyes, refusing to meet hers. The whispers grew louder. "She mocked his mother," one woman said near the front. Another man muttered, "Disgraceful." Layla's voice rose, shrill and panicked. "You're all believing her over me? This is my wedding. She's nothing but bitter." I stood, calm, not raising my voice. "I have been silent all evening, but silence only protects cruelty. Tonight everyone here knows who you are." Her chest heaved, and in that moment, something inside her snapped. She slammed her glass onto the table, the stem breaking in her hand. Gasps filled the hall. Daniel tried to steady her, but she pulled away violently. "You will regret this," she spat, her eyes burning into me. But the damage was already done. The attorney placed the will back in his folder, the notary still standing with her seal. Guests had seen enough to know the truth. The atmosphere shifted. What had been celebration now felt like judgment. The DJ, unsure, attempted to restart the music, but the notes felt hollow. Conversations swelled louder than the melody. Groups of guests began gathering, retelling the scene in rapid voices. A few laughed under their breath, unable to hide their satisfaction. Others shook their heads, muttering about the shame of it all. Daniel finally spoke, his voice heavy. "Layla, this is not how I imagined tonight." His words struck harder than any accusation. She reached for him again, tears spilling down her cheeks now, but he pulled back. "Stop. Just stop." The silence between them spoke volumes. Layla's mother rushed forward, wrapping an arm around her daughter, glaring at me with fury. "You've ruined everything," she hissed. I met her stare without blinking. "No, your daughter ruined it when she mocked me. All I did was show the truth." Her mother dragged Layla away from the center, but it was too late. The guests had seen everything. The bride, who had glowed under the chandeliers only hours ago, now sat hunched at the table, face buried in her hands, her gown wrinkled and stained from spilled champagne. Daniel walked to my side, still pale, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I looked at him, my heart aching. "Because you were happy, and I wanted to believe she could change. But tonight, you needed to see for yourself." He swallowed hard, looking back at Layla, then at the guests, watching with wide eyes. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, the weight of his choice pressed down on him. The hall no longer felt like a wedding. It was a trial, and the verdict had already been delivered. Layla's image as the perfect bride had shattered beyond repair. Every smile, every mocking whisper, every cruel joke she had thought was hidden now lived in the minds of 300 witnesses. I sat down again, folding my hands calmly. The humiliation that had once burned me had shifted, returned to its rightful place. It no longer belonged to me. It belonged to her. Layla lifted her head once more, her mascara streaked, her voice trembling but still sharp. This isn't over. You'll pay for this. But her threat only sounded hollow. The guests were no longer on her side. The room itself had turned against her, and for the first time, she looked small inside her gown of lace and jewels. Daniel did not answer her. He turned to the attorney instead, his voice quiet but certain. Please leave the document with me. The attorney nodded and placed the sealed copy in Daniel's hand. The act was symbolic, final. The inheritance, the conditions, the power. It was real, and it was his to carry now. The applause that rose was hesitant at first, then stronger. It was not for Layla. It was not even for Daniel. It was for the moment of truth, for the justice that had unfolded before their eyes. The night was no longer about the union of two families. It had become a lesson, one that everyone present would carry long after they left the glittering hall. Respect is not optional. Love without it is nothing but a lie waiting to be exposed. The ballroom no longer held the same air of celebration. The chandeliers still glowed, the music still tried to fill the silence, but the damage was done. Layla sat at her table, shoulders shaking, her face streaked with makeup, while her bridesmaids whispered frantically around her. Every guest had seen the scene unfold, and there was no way to erase it. The humiliation clung to her like a second gown she could not take off. Daniel remained standing near me, his hand gripping the sealed copy of my will. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on nothing. He looked like a man caught between duty and heartbreak. The truth weighed on him now, heavier than the tuxedo on his shoulders. Layla's father finally stood, slamming his palm on the table to get attention. "Enough of this spectacle," he barked. His voice boomed, but the room did not bend to him. Guests turned, watching with narrowed eyes. He pointed at me. "You have disrespected our family. You will leave this wedding immediately." I rose slowly, calm, and looked at him. "Your daughter disrespected me. All I did was reveal it. Do not mistake truth for insult." He glared, his face red. But before he could speak again, Daniel cut him off. "No, Dad. Stop." His voice carried, strong for the first time that evening. "You think you can dismiss my mother like she is nothing? She raised me. She paid for this wedding. She has given me everything. And what did your family give tonight? Cruelty." The silence that followed was deeper than any music could cover. Layla's father sank back into his seat, defeated by the strength in Daniel's voice. Layla rose suddenly, slamming her hands on the table. "Daniel, how can you take her side after what she just did? She embarrassed me in front of everyone. She destroyed our wedding." He looked at her, his expression torn but resolute. "You destroyed it yourself. You laughed at her. You mocked her in a language you thought she couldn't understand. Do you think I can build a marriage on that?" Her tears fell faster, but her words grew sharper. "You're pathetic. You let her control you with her money. You're nothing without me." Daniel's voice hardened. "No, Layla. I'm nothing without respect. And you've shown me tonight you don't have any." The gasps in the room were loud, like a wave hitting the walls. Guests whispered again, some shaking their heads, some already pulling out their phones to text what they had witnessed. Layla's downfall was no longer private. It had become the story of the evening. The attorney cleared his throat, speaking again for all to hear. "The conditions of the will are now public record. Should the marriage proceed, Mrs. Carter's estate will not pass to the bride unless she honors the terms. If these terms are violated, all assets revert to Daniel alone." Layla's eyes widened. She turned back to me, rage pouring out of her. You planned this from the beginning. You wanted to trap me, to humiliate me. I met her fury with calm. No, I wanted to see if you were worthy of my son. Tonight, you gave me the answer. The truth cut deeper than any insult. She collapsed back into her chair, covering her face, sobbing. Her bridesmaids tried to console her, but their own eyes betrayed judgment. They had watched the queen of the night fall, and none of them could lift her back up. Daniel placed the sealed will on the table beside me, then faced the guests. I want to apologize to everyone who came here to celebrate. Tonight was supposed to be about love and family, but sometimes truth shows itself at the worst moment. His voice cracked, but he held steady. I would rather face the truth tonight than live a lie for the rest of my life. The applause that followed was not wild, but steady and respectful. People rose to their feet, not for Layla, not for her family, but for the courage of truth laid bare. Layla's mother hissed something in her daughter's ear, but it was drowned by the clapping. Layla rose once more, her face twisted, and shouted over the noise. You will regret this, all of you. You'll regret crossing me. But her words only sounded empty now. She stormed toward the doors, her gown dragging behind her, her family rushing to follow. The guests continued to clap, some shaking Daniel's hand, some giving me nods of respect. The music had stopped, but the sound of acknowledgement filled the hall more powerfully than any song. I sat again, letting the weight of the moment settle. Layla had lost her stage, her pride, and her mask. What remained was the rubble of arrogance collapsing under its own weight. And Daniel, though shaken, stood taller than before, no longer blind to the truth. The wedding was broken, the union in ruins, but justice had taken its place. The doors slammed behind Layla and her family, and for a long moment the ballroom felt frozen. The chandeliers sparkled, the tables glittered with untouched glasses, yet the celebration had vanished. Guests shifted in their seats, glancing at me, at Daniel, at the attorney still holding the folder. The truth lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Daniel walked back toward me slowly, his steps heavy. His tuxedo, once neat, was wrinkled, his bow tie loose. He stopped at my table, his eyes meeting mine. "Mum," he said quietly, "I don't even know what to say." I touched his arm. "You don't need to say anything. Tonight wasn't about speeches. It was about seeing people for who they really are." He sank into the chair beside me, his shoulders sagging. For the first time that evening, he looked less like a groom and more like the boy I had raised, worn down by disappointment. "I thought I knew her," he admitted. "I thought love was enough." I nodded slowly. "Love can't survive without respect. That's why I had to show you." He rubbed his forehead with his hand, his voice low. "Did you know all along?" I sighed. I hoped I was wrong. I prayed that tonight would prove me wrong, but the moment she mocked me, I knew it had to end. The guests began to stir, conversations rising again. Some drifted toward the exits, unwilling to linger in the aftermath. Others approached our table, offering Daniel handshakes, offering me nods of acknowledgement. No one mentioned Layla's name. She was already fading into silence. The attorney leaned closer to me. "Do you wish to proceed with any further formalities?" he asked. I shook my head. No, the message was enough. He bowed slightly, gathered his documents, and left the hall with the notary. Daniel looked at me again. His eyes glistened, though no tears fell. "You shouldn't have had to do that. Not tonight." I held his hand. "I didn't want to, but I wasn't going to let her build a life with you by tearing me down." He squeezed my hand, his voice firm now. I see that, and I see her for what she is. You've always been right about people, Mum. I just didn't want to listen. The band members, still seated with their instruments, looked to the DJ for instruction. The DJ hesitated, then quietly switched on a soft, instrumental track. The notes floated gently through the air, trying to patch the cracks left behind. Some guests began dancing again, not out of joy, but as a way to ease the tension. Others collected their coats, slipping out into the night. What remained was no longer a wedding, but a gathering that had witnessed a reckoning. Daniel stayed close to me, refusing to step back into the spotlight. He seemed lost, but calmer. The weight of illusions had lifted, leaving only truth. At one point, he leaned in again and whispered, "Do you think anyone will ever forget this night?" I looked around the room at the guests who still whispered, the sideways glances, the curious eyes. "No," I said honestly, "but maybe that's not a bad thing." He frowned. "How could it not be bad?" "Because they all saw the truth," I answered. "And the truth, no matter how painful, frees you. It frees you from lies, from false promises. Tonight might hurt, but tomorrow you'll wake up knowing exactly where you stand." He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. His face still carried the shadows of heartbreak, but there was a quiet strength building beneath it. As the minutes passed, the ballroom settled into a different rhythm. Waiters continued to serve drinks, though fewer glasses were taken. The massive cake still stood, untouched, its golden decorations now absurd in the aftermath. A few children chased each other near the dance floor, their laughter cutting through the tension, a reminder that life always moves forward. Daniel finally rose, extending his hand to me. "Come on, Mum. Let's leave this behind." I stood with him, steady on my feet. As we walked toward the exit, the remaining guests parted, offering nods, some clapping softly, as if acknowledging that justice had been served. At the doors, Daniel paused, looking back once at the room where his wedding had crumbled. "I'll never forget this," he said. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Good. Some things are meant to be remembered, not as pain, but as lessons." Together, we stepped into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered beyond the hotel drive, and the noise of the world outside felt fresh after the storm inside. Daniel stood silently beside me, his breath visible in the chill. He finally spoke. "Thank you, Mum, for everything, even if it hurt." I looked at him, my heart aching and proud all at once. "You're my son. I'd rather you hurt now than live blind for the rest of your life." He nodded, his jaw tightening with resolve. "I understand." The valet pulled his car forward, the headlights washing over us. He opened the door for me, then walked around to the driver's side. As we drove away, the hotel fading into the distance, I knew the wedding was over. But something more important had begun. The bond between mother and son had been tested, and it had held. The lies had been stripped away, leaving only truth. And though the night had ended in ruins, it carried the weight of something stronger than any promise spoken at an altar. The drive home was quiet. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. The hotel lights disappeared behind us, swallowed by the city night. Neither of us spoke for a long while. There was no need. The silence was not heavy. It was healing. When we finally pulled into the driveway of my house, Daniel turned off the engine and sat for a moment. His face was tired, but clearer than I had ever seen it. He looked at me and said, "I can't believe everything happened like that, but I also can't deny it needed to happen." I nodded slowly. Sometimes the hardest truths come at the worst times. but facing them is better than living blind. We went inside, and the familiar warmth of my home wrapped around us. The scent of old books, the soft light of the lamps, the quiet hum of the heater. It felt safe. Daniel sat on the couch, loosening his tie, while I brought us both tea. When I set the cup in front of him, he took my hand. "Mum," he said, "I know tonight was ugly, but thank you. You protected me from a life that would have destroyed me." I squeezed his hand gently. "I didn't want to hurt you. I only wanted you to see the truth for yourself. That way, when you walk forward, you walk with open eyes." For the first time all night, a small smile touched his face. It was weary, but real. The days that followed were not easy. The story of the wedding spread quickly. People talked. Some criticized me for making a scene. Others praised me for standing my ground. But the truth was out, and no one could change that. Then, 1 week later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it and found Layla standing there. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from tears. She looked nothing like the proud bride who had once mocked me in front of hundreds. She stood there in silence until I finally spoke. "Why are you here?" Her voice was hoarse. "I came to apologize. I know I can't undo what I said. I know I humiliated you. I thought I was better, and I was wrong." I studied her carefully. She was broken in a way that no performance could fake. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. "I loved Daniel," she whispered. "But I also loved what he had, what you had. I was blinded by it. I didn't respect you, and I see now how ugly that was." I sat across from her, my hands folded. "Respect is not optional, Layla. Without it, love means nothing. You hurt me, but more than that, you betrayed yourself." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Can you ever forgive me?" The room was quiet, only the ticking of the clock between us. I thought about the insults, the laughter, the humiliation, but I also thought about Daniel, about the future he deserved, and about the truth of forgiveness. Finally, I said, "I can forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry bitterness any longer." She bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel returned later that day, surprised to find her there. Their conversation was long, filled with anger, regret, and tears. I stayed in the kitchen, giving them space. When Daniel finally came in, he looked both exhausted and lighter. "She knows what she lost," he said quietly. "And maybe that's enough." Life moved forward. The wedding was remembered not for its vows or its cake, but for the truth revealed in that ballroom. Daniel took time to heal. Layla went her own way, learning her lessons, and I found peace, knowing that justice had been done, but so had forgiveness. Because the truth is, revenge may satisfy in the moment, but forgiveness heals in the long run. I did not forgive to excuse her. I forgave to set myself free. And that freedom was worth more than any inheritance, any property, or any grand wedding could ever give. If you've stayed with me until the end, I want to ask you something. Do you believe forgiveness makes us stronger, or does it only let people escape their consequences? I've shared my story because I know many of you have faced betrayal, cruelty, or disrespect in your own families. Tell me in the comments what you think about the balance between justice and forgiveness. Should we forgive to heal ourselves, or should we hold the line so that others finally face the weight of their actions? I'd love to hear your thoughts.